Well, welcome everyone to Salary Negotiations, our graduate professional development seminar. Today, I'm Maureen Cathy. In case I haven't met you yet, most people faces are familiar. I'm the Associate Director in Business Career Services and the Career Coach, specifically for our graduate students, as well as some of our undergraduate students also. And today we're going to talk about salary negotiation, which is usually a pretty popular topic because we would like to have the best salary we possibly can. Also, it's one that I'm excited about because not enough people, I think, feel comfortable and take advantage of salary negotiation process. Salary negotiation process also isn't just for when you're getting a job. Obviously, that's going to be happening at different times in your life. You're probably going to be switching organizations, switching jobs, and salary negotiation might be a part of it, but it also is the same type of tools that you and skills that you use if you are trying to get a raise or have some sort of change within the role that you're in. So hopefully these tips are not just for right now, but will also continue on into the future. If anybody has actually done some salary negotiation already and has any additional or real world tips that you want to throw in here at any point as well, that's great because it's nice to actually hear about things in process. Okay, as I mentioned, we're recording the session. If you want to go back and take a look at this or have other people that you know that want to see it as soon as possible, I will get it up on our Business Career Services YouTube page and connect it to the links on the workshop area of the website. All right, so let's dive in. So maybe having a little trouble seeing that with our students here, but negotiation, we're going to first start with a definition of that. So really, it's a discussion aimed at reaching an agreement. I think one of the very first things that most people tell me is I'm a little nervous about salary negotiation. That's the piece that they are fearing a little bit, not sure what they want to do with it. I think people come at it from a little bit different perspective and aren't thinking about it as a discussion, first of all, and aren't thinking about it as a win-win situation, which really it is a win-win situation. You already have someone who wants you on their team. They want to provide for you as much as they possibly can, really. Realistically, they want to do what's going to make you happy so that you are going to join that team and are engaged participant in that team. So it really is a win-win situation. It's not a battle to be won. It's a problem-solving conversation. It's something that you do in other aspects of your life. So again, just a discussion, trying to get to an agreement on something that's going to be a positive for both parties. So it's not quite like a negotiation for, maybe getting that car down in price or anything like that. Sometimes that feels like maybe one side is trying to outdo the other. This one really is a negotiation to get to a win-win kind of place. So some information about salary negotiation. So this little graphic here talks just a little bit from a survey that was done by Robert Half, but within this survey, it's a little bit older. This one's, I think, 2017, but less than 40% of the people surveyed negotiated for a higher salary offer. Only 46% of males negotiated, and then even less, 34% of women negotiated. I want to bring this up for a couple of reasons. One, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't negotiate because not everybody does it. It actually means you definitely should take advantage of the opportunity to negotiate and not leave potential money or other benefits on the table. Also, gender identity should not play a role in this whatsoever. Doesn't matter what your gender identity is, doesn't matter the person that you're negotiating with. It really is a discussion. And so I would like to see, more women are taking advantage of this as well, particularly because we already know that there are some discrepancies in the workplace related to salary ranges for female identifying employees. And so we want to make sure you're starting from the best possible starting place you can and using some of these things as part of your negotiation tools to get to that place. The other graphic here, again, just talks about numbers, and this is a different survey done in 2018 or 2019. They did one in 2018. It was 31%. Now it's up to, was up to 33%. I'm sure that number is increasing a little bit, but this is really an average that we've see over the years. The part I wanted to you to notice here is that for those who did negotiate, 83% say they received higher pay. So that's a pretty good return on investment there of taking the time to do a little salary negotiation. Also, the other piece of this that's not highlighted would be none of those people who negotiated received less pay than what they were originally offered. You're starting from a starting point. It's not going to go less than that. You're trying to achieve something a little bit higher than that. And in this survey, 83% were successful in doing that. Now, we also want to be realistic in our salary negotiations. So taking a look at this chart, you'll see a little bit about how much higher those negotiations were able to get them in that salary range. So really, most of those fall into that 10% or less area. So some realistic range maybe to think about. Obviously, it depends a little bit on many factors that we're going to talk about, your research and what you're bringing to the table. It may be that you feel like in this instance, it's warranted to negotiate for a higher place than that 10%. But you know that if you're in that area, that's probably a good, reasonable area to be asking for, and very well might be successful in that salary negotiation. Okay, so before we talk about how to negotiate, we kind of need to talk a little bit about what you're negotiating and what you're looking at when you receive a job offer. We're also going to, all of these things again relate to if you're already in a job as well. So I'm mostly going to use language that focuses on if you're negotiating that job offer, but most of these things stay the same even if you're negotiating within an organization. So your compensation package is really more than just the salary. Salary negotiations is often what we think about in here. We think about that, what is that salary going to be when I get offered this position? But there's so much more that is a part of that compensation package. And I'm sure you all are aware of that, but sometimes it's just a reminder of all those pieces that might be there, more even than are on this screen, and that you should be looking at that whole package and evaluating it, especially if you're trying to compare, which is difficult because it's really usually not apples to apples. It's apples to oranges that you're comparing when you're looking at compensation packages, because there are other factors that are thrown in. But you should be looking at that whole compensation package when you're thinking about decisions that you're going to make, as well as what you might want to try and negotiate. So base salary, we're going to get into, and that is the big piece. It's also really, you'll hear me say that it's the piece you should negotiate first if you're going to negotiate for any salary increase. It is the piece that obviously future raises are based off of. It is the piece that is the starting point for it all. So it is really important. But there are other pieces as well. So bonuses are kind of in and out of favor depending on the economy, depending on your field that you're in, depending on where that need is, and if they're really trying to fill a lot of holes in their organization, it might be that some bonuses are involved. Sometimes those are signing bonuses, kind of a one-time, here's an extra bonus. Sometimes they're bonuses that are tied to a future results that you are going to produce, and there's bonuses involved with that. But bonuses, don't necessarily think if you're not being offered a bonus, that says something negative. Not all companies do this, but it can be a piece that is a part of that compensation package. Medical coverage, obviously a really important piece would be your healthcare, and it's a really large chunk of the money that's invested in you is some of that medical coverage. So medical coverage and retirement, both are pieces that many times are not negotiable, that they kind of have some set choices maybe that you're going to go for. But as far as looking at the package and making some decisions, it is really great if you can talk with someone in HR, do a little research, get some more information about what they are covering. What percentage of that medical and health insurance plan do they cover? What percentage are you putting in? Retirement, what are they putting in? What are you putting in? Where are their matches? Do they offer a 401k match? Where's the kind of cap on that? So all those things are things to consider, probably not as negotiable piece, but part of that package. Vacation or PTO, what does that look like? How much of vacation are they offering you? Will that grow or increase? It is something that could be potentially negotiated. Tuition reimbursement or tuition payment, for many of you that are already in graduate programs, you may or may not be thinking of any additional education, but tuition reimbursement sometimes is an offer that organizations make to kind of take care of some of those expenses that you might have acquired during your academic program. Also, tuition for future things in terms of educational level is possibly a part of the package. Relocation expenses, Sometimes companies will offer a relocation expense instead of a bonus, or maybe they offer a bonus, but they don't offer relocation, and that bonus kind of is supposed to help you cover relocation. So if you are moving, that is something that might be covered either as a whole, or it might be like here, we're going to give you, $2,000, and that's your relocation expenses, just kind of flat. So again, something that could potentially be looked at as a negotiation piece. Stock, ownership in the company, those kinds of things are also part of what may be offered as a part of the compensation package, depending on how that organization or that company is organized. Commuter subsidy, these are things like related to parking, related to travel, depending on your commute. Are they going to give you a subsidy for that? Sometimes you'll get a subsidy because you are able to not drive a vehicle and are taking more public transportation, biking, that kind of thing. So that can kind of go in a variety of directions, but there might be some sort of thing related to that. Parental leave. For some of you, this may be something you're thinking about or is important right now. For some of you, it may not be a piece right now, but it might be in the future. So something to look at is that company and organization's parental leave, adoption leave, partner leave kind of policies and what that looks like. And then the remote work, which feels kind of funny to put up there now, but some people, you are maybe looking for remote work, and it might be that from the start that a position is going to be remote. Some people may not have that as an option of seeing right from the start, but it might be something you could talk about, negotiate if that's something you desire, maybe a hybrid or flexible work schedule. I think organizations now are much more open to the possibilities of that as a discussion point. And so it could be something that you consider looking at as what they offer, and then consider for negotiation. Any questions on compensation package or other pieces that you're wondering about related to looking at kind of those offers and compensation packages? All right. So I just wanted to put up just a few other job offer considerations, because it's not always just about I'm negotiating my salary just so it can be higher, just so I can get the highest amount. Especially if you're in the great position of being able to make some choices and compare different offers. It may not always be about salary for the decisions that you make. Again, it could determine what you want to negotiate. It could determine what you're willing to take as an offer. So thinking about these kind of questions may help you with some of that decision-making process. Is your interest in the organization still strong after they make you the offer? And considering what they offered you salary-wise, again, you might be able to negotiate that, but do you still feel like this is really an organization you want to invest in that conversation? Will you gain new skills or bolster old skills in this job? Again, always future thinking about where this job might lead you to. Is this position consistent with both your short-term and long-term goals? How does this job compare to your ideal job? And it may not check off all the boxes. That would be ideal and great, but comparing it and seeing kind of that level of where it meets your ideal job ideas. How will this position impact your personal life and relationships? So again, maybe they aren't willing to negotiate remote and hybrid, and because of a relationship you're in, you really need to stay in a certain geographic location. That's going to factor into your decisions about maybe an offer. So all those types of things, what you need in your life may be something you need to consider when you look at the job compensation package. Is the salary acceptable? Is it in that range? Is it something that you would be good with? I still suggest that you negotiate, but is that salary in that acceptable area for you? And then again, the other elements of the benefits package, and how does that kind of all stack up together? Okay, so salary negotiations feels like it's the end point. It feels like it's what you do at the very last step of the job search process, but it's not. It really needs to, the preparation for it needs to start happening before the interview even takes place. So what you're all doing right now helps you to prepare. There's some other things that I'm going to suggest. In almost every session I do, it's about preparation, and it's about the things that you can do ahead of time. And salary negotiations is no different. So before the interview, you actually want to do some preparation. This is also because you may start to get questions, even in the application process and in the interview process, about your needs, about your salary expectations, that may start to come up. So preparation ahead of time is really important. So a couple things to do in terms of that preparation. You want to research appropriate pay rates for the position. Now, if it was only that easy, that would be great. The difficulty always with this is that position titles vary. Job descriptions within position, even the same title varies. So can be a little challenging to get that good appropriate pay rate, but there are some tools to be able to do it. So these are some links to salary calculators and information about salary ranges within different roles, within different industries. So all that can kind of come together to help you try to parse out what is the salary range, appropriate range for this kind of role, at this either entry level or at this mid-level, kind of wherever you are in your expertise. And then some other things to think about with the pay rates for positions. If you can get some good information from contacts or your network or informational interviews and get that real live data, that's really great. So that means, people that maybe that were in the program and are now working in that same type of role, people who might be working in that organization that you're interviewing with. Now the challenge is, again, not everybody feels really comfortable just talking about their salary and the money that they're bringing in, but you can always let them know why you're asking these questions, what information you're trying to get. You can ask them for a range. Hopefully they don't give you too large of a range, because that doesn't help you a whole lot. But if they can give you a small range, they don't have to say their exact pay. You can ask someone maybe that you have a networking relationship with, or that you're doing an informational interview with. What did they start out? If they haven't been that long from their starting point, what did they start out as? Because again, if they've already received some raises and bump ups, that information, what they're making right now, might not be as relevant. So if you can get some of that live information, that's great. LinkedIn, the salary information is good because people are putting their salaries in there based on roles and companies. So you can even, kind of search and find out what that looks like. So that's a good one. Yeah, so these are places to try and find as best that you can the appropriate pay range for your position at this point in time. We have some information that comes from our graduates. I'll put in a plug right now, though, for when you are graduating and you get the salary graduation survey from me about your great next steps. We aggregate that. We don't, put that with you individually, but it's really, really helpful if we have some salary information to then provide to current students and those looking at the program. We tend not to have enough to really make it a real valid piece of information and data point, but we do have some information. We put some averages out on the website for overall, graduates from the MBA program. Again, different jobs, different things though. So other thing to research is the cost of living, where you're going to be. Now, thing to remember here is that if it's a decent organization, they have already factored this into their offer. You'll even see that some offers, some organizations are putting their salary or their salary range on their job postings a lot more frequently now. Not all do that, but it may even have some differences depending on which location you're going to be in, or it may say it's based on, if it's a remote position, it may say what kind of pay rate it's based on Colorado, cost of living, if that's a Colorado company. But again, most organizations have already factored in their cost of living into the offer that you're making. So it's important to know, for your own benefit, to know if you can live on that salary in that location, those kinds of things. It's not really a negotiation bargaining chip for you. You can't really say, well, it's going to cost me more to live in Denver than it does for me to live in Boone, and so I need more money. Like, that's not really a way to get something from them, because they're going to say, well, we've already factored that in. You do need to make some decisions, though, about your acceptable range based on your needs. So again, if you've got all this research, also researching kind of your budget, your needs, what you're looking for. Again, not a negotiation bargaining chip, because just saying to someone, well, I just bought a new car, and so I really need a higher salary because I have a higher car payment. They care about you, but they're not going to care about that, about those choices that you're making. But you, again, need to know your walkaway number. You need to know what your salary range needs to be to meet your needs. There's additional resources you can consult to help you prepare for salary negotiations and to maybe find out some of those kind of appropriate pay ranges and things. One of the things that I've linked here is just a YouTube video for a Harvard Business School professor talking about negotiations in general, but we're kind of specifically honed in on salary negotiations. It's a pretty long video, but if you're really wanting some more information, that's there. There's also other great stuff out there on the internet. All right, so in addition to that research that you're going to do, just as you've researched yourself before an interview, you're researching those things before the interview, so you have some baseline information about salary range. You also need to believe. So you need to believe in your value. Again, most of the time when I talk with people and they're nervous about salary negotiations, it's because they don't have enough confidence that they are bringing, something to that organization that they should be able to negotiate based on. So you need to know your value and you need to believe in that value. So in order to know that value, you need to reflect on what you're bringing to that company. Obviously, that's probably part of what you've already been doing to prepare for an interview itself. But again, specifically thinking about it in terms of salary negotiation, you want to be able to bring back up to them. What are some of those specific accomplishments? What are those skills, maybe even unique skills or combination of skills? What are your positive traits? How are you going to add value to that organization? And they should already know some of those things because that's why they're interested in hiring you, but you're bringing them back up to remind them of not only did you want me, but I'm bringing something that maybe not everybody else can. I'm bringing my unique self. And so that's perhaps why I'm worth a higher salary than what has originally been offered. So just one kind of, language is going to be something you have to kind of figure out and hone in on what works for you. But this is just to give you an idea of some of the things that you might say as a part of that salary negotiation and when you're approaching that. So in this instance, the person is able to talk about their background in running their own small business for 5 years, gave me a breadth of experience in everything from HR to project management, as well as highlighting my initiative and grit. So now we've talked about accomplishments, we've talked about some of our traits, skills. You can bring in that, education that you're adding value with. My MBA education is added to my knowledge in analyzing data and managing teams. Given my background and skill set, I believe a starting salary of $75,000 is an appropriate base salary. So where do we get that 75 number? From our research. We know what the range is, we know kind of what is going to be an appropriate ask, and then based on the additional things that we can bring, we're asking for that amount as an appropriate base salary to kind of to do that negotiation. Now, this is going to come up after they've already presented you with an offer, hopefully, because you don't want to be the first person to put out that number. But this is just some language to think about in terms of that believing in what you're offering that organization. And then also in terms of preparation, you want to practice. So if you can, especially if this is something that makes you a little bit nervous, role play this with someone you trust. A colleague that you have in the program, even a faculty member might work, but particularly maybe someone that you know in the field, someone that you trust, maybe someone who's been there, done that before. Do a little bit of role playing. If you can't role play with someone, just practicing it and maybe recording yourself on Zoom, making those negotiation statements at least. You might not have anyone responding back, but you can see how it feels to say the words that you want to say. For some people, asking for things is hard. And so just making the effort to record yourself doing the ask, seeing if it sounds, right, fits for your needs, fits for your personality, that can be a good thing to do. Also, just outlining some different scenarios depending on, the response you might get, so that if you get a response back of, no, we can't do that, what are you going to feel confident saying back? Also, where in that scenario are you going to maybe stop that negotiation process and consider what that final offer might be. So practicing is really important kinds of things that you can do ahead of time to make you feel more comfortable and confident when you are actually in the situation. Okay, so some rules of negotiation. The first step here is to be patient. So we're going to try and postpone salary negotiations as long as possible. You want to try to do that until after you're offered the job. You want to try to hopefully have the other side present that compensation package to you first and be the first person to put out the offer. If you're asked verbally, for kind of what's your salary need, what are you expecting in terms of a salary, particularly maybe during the interview process. You want to stall by refocusing the conversation back to the role. And I'm going to give you some language options or things that might be helpful a little bit later in the presentation. But, by stalling, I mean, and refocusing back on the role, you can say, well, I've given to some thought what an appropriate salary range would be, in this role, but I'm not sure that I am fully aware of all the requirements and all the skills that I'll be using within this role. So I'd love to talk about it a little bit more before I would put a value out there. They may still press. You've given them an answer though, so most people are not going to continue to press, and so now you've redirected the conversation. Now, if they've asked that in an interview though, that if that's maybe a first interview, let's say, and they're asking, it probably is going to come up again. So you want to be prepared for that in the future. But if you can, be patient and hopefully be, there at the end that you're doing this negotiation. So next rule, be silent. When you hear the offer, don't jump right into, like, when they offer you the job, don't say, great, I accept, because you haven't done your negotiation yet, right? Be silent for a little bit, hear the offer, hear what their package is that they're offering you, maybe repeat back to them some of those things that they're saying so that that you're clearly hearing what it is that they have to offer. Then obviously asking for, showing enthusiasm and excitement for what they've just brought to you, but saying that you would like to review the offer before responding. Most people expect that. But if you can, then especially if something's unclear, but really no matter what, ask for that offer in writing. They should be sending that to you. They should be emailing you an offer if they're making it. And most will say, we'll be emailing you this offer this afternoon, but I just wanted to call and tell you now, da, 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 da. But you do want to, if they don't say that, you do want to say, would you be able to, email me the outline of the compensation package and the offer that you're presenting. So that way that you have that and what it is that you're countering. You don't want to kind of assume something about the rest of the package or, have any kind of misunderstanding about what they've offered you before you start to counter. And then when you have that in writing, you have a time to do maybe a little bit more research and think about what your response is going to be. So be knowledgeable. That comes from the research that you're doing. So you want to have done that research ahead of time. You want to maybe even do some more research then to come back with an aggressive but reasonable counteroffer. That's always the goal. You want as much as you can. You also want it to be in that reasonable area so that you're setting yourself up for a good discussion with the other person. Also, by having this knowledge in your background, if the request is rejected, so if you say that you would like, if you do some salary negotiation or you're trying to get a little higher amount, if they reject it, but sounds like maybe there's still a door that's open, that's just sort of their immediate response is, I don't know that we can do that. You'll have ways to justify what you've asked for, and you'll have ways to maybe gently push back a little bit more on why you're asking for that. If they give you sort of a, actually our first offer in our organization is our best offer, and hopefully maybe you've even found some of that out by doing some of that research. If you've been able to dig a little bit into that particular company, you might find out that they really do. They offer a great salary, but that offer is non-negotiable. Some companies are like that. So if they say that, we don't negotiate salary for our incoming hires, our first offer is our best offer, we've already taken into consideration kind of market value and for equity reasons, this is what we do. Well, now great, they've given you an answer. You don't need to keep pushing back on that one. You could ask, if you're still really concerned maybe about another piece, maybe you're comparing this with another offer, you could let them know that and say, are there any other pieces of the compensation package that are negotiable other than salary? But it might be that is what they give you, is that information. You just want to have the knowledge to be able to push back if you feel like you can and want to. Be flexible. If there is no movement on salary, as we've already talked about, you can negotiate for other things. There are other parts of that compensation package. So extra paid leave, moving expenses, different start date, all those things could potentially be things that you negotiate, and you want to get that all figured out before you say, yes, I'm, signing on the dotted line. And then finally, be brave. Basically the thing here is you don't want your biggest regret when you start into this exciting new position to be that you left money on the table, and that you didn't at least try to negotiate. You may feel like you aren't successful in that negotiation if that salary isn't able to change, but at least you've tried, and you're not going to be wondering. You're not going to start a conversation with a new colleague and somehow maybe they are willing to talk about money and you find out that they negotiated and very quickly got a higher salary offer. That doesn't feel the best. So even if you don't get your exact desired amount, as we saw from that graphic, you may very well get at least a little bit more, and a little bit more is more. So be brave and be sure that you're trying to ask and do some of this salary negotiation. So a couple more do's and don'ts that we've probably already kind of reflected in some of our different topics of conversation here, but considering the timing and deflection, like I said, it's if you can deflect during an interview, if you can deflect till later, that's best. You do want to respond with appreciation. So like I said, that silence is you don't want to agree to something right away or jump right in before you understand the full offer, but you do want to be enthusiastic and let them know that you are excited that they've offered you this position. You are excited about the potential to work with them. You want to start with consensus points. So, maybe if there are parts of the package that you're like, I think that's a really, I'm really excited that your organization offers this 401k match. Start with some things that you do kind of agree on, and also the consensus points of what you're going to bring to that role. But that's a good place to start a negotiation, is with consensus points. Obviously, we've already talked about the researching and the using benchmarks in terms of determining what salary you're going to be asking for. You want to think in your head that this is a win-win. That's going to help you feel less nervous. It's also going to help you present your requests, and then they present their offers in a really positive manner. If you're thinking about this as, I'm not trying to, get something out of them that they wouldn't be willing to give, it's going to be a win-win because they're going to get me as a great employee. Establish rapport. If possible, it's great if you can do this salary negotiation with somebody that you have established rapport with. Maybe it's an interviewer that you've been talking with. Maybe you've had a chance to meet the hiring manager and that's who it is. But whoever it is, hopefully you have already kind of got a little bit of rapport with. If not, it's great to try and not just, if it's somebody you haven't met before, a little bit of small talk and everything might be good before you jump right into your ask for salary negotiations. Use effective communication. So all the things that you've learned through time about effective communication skills, listening to them. Be sure that you are choosing your words from that win-win analogy kind of perspective. Those will all help you with effective communication. Some don'ts. Again, we're not going to counter with the first kind of initial salary. We're going to not become emotional or defensive. You want to take, that piece out of it. Obviously, it's emotional to think about what could or couldn't be with a salary and what that could do for you. But you want to take out some of that emotional kind of piece. If you're being really defensive because you feel like you're of a much higher value, then it may just be that that's not the organization for you if they aren't valuing you in the way that you have found should be reasonable. You don't want to use personal needs for negotiation. We already talked about that with the car loan, right? That is important for you to know, but they're not going to care so much about what those personal needs are. They're wanting to know what reason they have to pay you more, what value add you're bringing. Don't patronize the employer in that kind of effective communication kind of thing. Don't talk too much or show off your ego. You want to, keep this, is why practicing a little bit is good. Keep it pretty concise and to your points that you want to make. So some language ideas. So these are some of the things to think about as potentials. Again, everybody's going to have their own ideas of what is going to work for them. But some things, some of these are more appropriate in different situations. So like this first one is probably more appropriate if they're really pressing you early on in the process to give them your salary needs or salary range, what your expectations are. So this is where you want to just bring up that you've done some research, comparable positions in the Raleigh area that include production and project management, average closer to, this actually would be yes, if they've already given you some idea range, closer to $75,000 to $90,000 yearly. So that comes from research that you've done. You know, that would be something that you could also use earlier on in that interview process. If you're earlier on, a range is kind of good. If you go to the actual negotiation piece and countering, it's usually better to have a set number and not give a range, because of course with a range, they can come back at the bottom of your range. So ranges are usually used more when you're earlier on in the process and maybe they're asking for something, or when you're trying to justify where you came up with a number. So this next one is really part of that, starting that negotiation salary. I'm really excited about the possibility of working with your team at XYZ, and I know I'm going to bring value to this position. I appreciate the offer of $58,000, but really was expecting to be more in the $65,000 range. But you got to have the why based on my experience, education, initiative, and drive, as well as the average range of those in similar positions in the Charlotte area. So that tells them I didn't just come up with this because I thought I'm going to graduate and get $65,000. I just pulled that out of thin air. It's because of your research, and it's because of what you're bringing to the organization. So if you're asking for more money, you're showing them why they should value you in that way. Can we look at a salary of $65,000 for this position? So again, you notice that one is a number. Now, is that number your walkaway number that you're like starting with? You know, if you say, can we look at a salary of $65,000 for this position? You don't want to have started to the point where you're like, I know I would take 62 for this, but I'm not going to say, can we look at a salary of 62? You're wanting to say a higher number there so that hopefully you get that additional amount of money. So here's another thing to approach. Maybe this first one is even an email response if they or something, or just talking to them about finding a time, setting up a time to do the salary negotiation. So you're kind of letting them know to expect that you're going to be asking for some things. So this is an exciting opportunity and offer. I would like a chance to discuss the base salary, moving expenses, and start date. So maybe those are the three things that you've determined. Again, we're starting with base salary first, though. Are these things we could find time to discuss? So you're letting them, kind of setting them up to know that. They just be prepared that they might say, sure, let's discuss it right now. Or they might say, let's set up a time. The next one, well, I've done some research on ABC. I would like to learn and talk more about the role and how I would fit in your organization before we talk salary. So that's obviously a comeback to an early on in the interview process question of, you know, what are your salary needs? What do you expect us to pay you? This next one is if they come back and their answer is, I just don't have the authority to negotiate that salary or give you that additional pay. You could say something along the, I understand your constraints and I'm willing to wait for you to talk about this with your supervisor. So you're letting them know, I don't need you to answer me right now, but it'd be great if you could talk with whoever is able to make those decisions. Maybe they come back and they're saying, I don't know that we can do that because we want to be careful with our equity and our internal equity issues we're going to face if we bring you in at a higher amount. So you might say, I can appreciate the internal equity issues you face. If there's no change that can be made in base salary, can we look at, and then you go into that other benefits discussion and know ahead of time what it is that you might want to ask for. So, you know, in that space, maybe they're saying, we just don't negotiate that base salary because of our internal equity issues that we want to be sure that we're taking care of. And then another approach is if they're just sort of saying, yep, we can't negotiate salary, you might say, okay, can we start at the X amount that they've offered and then review in 6 months? So for a lot of organizations, a yearly performance review cycle is common. And then sometimes that's when that salary potential increase is based on that review that's done in 12 months. Well, if you are confident in the value you're going to bring to that organization, you're confident that in those 6 months, you're going to impress, you could say something like that and say, you know, instead of having a review a year from now, could we review a little bit earlier than that to see what contributions I've made and if there can be a change in salary. So that's another approach if you're given a no. Some things not to say. These seem pretty commonplace, and yet we hear about people saying some of these things. So I just want to bring them up. we've already talked about how you just don't want to say, I accept, I accept the first offer that they give you. If you're planning on do salary negotiations, which I highly encourage you to do, you want to express that enthusiasm and then say you'd like to take that into consideration and then come back and ask for that opportunity to negotiate. If possible, you don't just want to throw out early on in the process, I'm looking for $75,000. You don't want to just give them one number. You don't want to give them also, a bottom line number or something that's unrealistic. Obviously, you don't want to counter back with that's all you're offering me and be just incredulous that that's what they're offering you as part of the position. That's not going to go over well to set you up. You don't want to just answer no. If they make you an offer, you want to try to negotiate back. If the reason why you're going to be hesitant is because of that salary compensation package, but you want to give them those reasons and maybe a chance to offer you something additional. So other outstanding offers. You don't want to say just flat out, I've got other outstanding offers right now that are much more lucrative. Because if they don't have a position to negotiate with you, then they're going to be like, okay, well, I guess you're going to have to go take one of those. Now, can you use other offers as a bargaining point? Yes, but be careful. So if you do have multiple offers that are out there, just understand that you don't want to lie about it. You don't want to create an offer that doesn't exist. Because again, interconnected world we live in, one way or another that might get found out. Also, they might ask you for some more details. And if you've created something, now you're going into an even bigger lie. So you don't want to just create an offer that doesn't exist. If you do have multiple offers, you can approach them with, always going with the enthusiasm and the positives first and buttering them up. Here's what I'm really excited about with your organization. I think I want to be here for these reasons, especially if that is maybe your first choice. But you can say, but I do have another offer that has come to me with, a higher base salary and X and Y. I'd really like to see if we can discuss this and negotiate a little bit to see if we can't get closer or get me to that point so that this would be the offer that I could really feel comfortable accepting. It may work for you. It may not. Again, they may care. And if they really want you, they may try and counter with, a matching salary. They may at least say, well, we can't match it, but we can give you this. It's still acceptable then to eventually accept that offer and take that if that's the company that you want to work for all those reasons we talked about earlier when you evaluated the compensation package. You don't want to come in with, this is my final and last offer. They may have to say to you, this is kind of the last piece that we can offer. We're not able to come up with anything more, but you don't want to come in with, this is my final and last offer. We talked about how that just doesn't really work to say what you need. You're trying to say why you're of value. Also, don't diminish what you're doing by kind of this passive starting point. So I hate to have to ask for this, but I'm wondering if I could, get a higher salary, basically. You don't want to preface it with, I hate to have to ask for this, because that's not true. You don't hate to ask for more money, and you're not bothering them. If anything, a lot of the recruiters that we talk to tell us, I expect people to negotiate, particularly if you're in more of a sales, kind of field, a marketing role, something where you're going to be doing some negotiation. They want to know that you have that skill. And for many of them, they expect that the negotiation is going to be a part of the process. They want to know that you value yourself. So you don't have to hate to have to ask for this. You don't have to preface it with that. You just want to be aggressive but reasonable and have done your research. You don't want to go with the least I'd be willing to accept. Like I said, you don't want to go with your bottom line, your walkaway number. You don't want to accuse them of being cheap or just, criticize them in that way. You don't want to come in, but I'm worth so much more. You may feel that way, but what you want to come back with is, I feel the value I bring to your organization is going to be X because of these skills. That's saying I am worth more, but you're showing it, not just saying it. Some other things that I wanted to point out, this is maybe a little bit more on the side of if you're already in a role and you're asking for a salary increase, a raise, think about who you'll be negotiating with. Is it someone who already knows your work, someone who already knows your value? Most times it is. I mean, most times it's, but if for some reason you're for a negotiation of salary, you're moved up to someone who may only be getting information about you from someone beneath them, and kind of funneling it up, you're going to have to know that you need to present more to them about your value. So knowing who you're going to be negotiating with and what they already know about your value is key. That's also actually true in a job offer one as well. If you know you'll be negotiating with somebody who's interviewed you, who already knows some of those great skills that you're bringing, well, you can still bring them up, but you already know the basis that, okay, they know where I'm coming from. If you're for some reason negotiating with someone who doesn't have that background on you, you're going to have to give them more. Are others within your job title or scope at different levels? Again, something that probably you are going to hear about or find out about. You don't necessarily, it's not that easy to go around and just ask everybody, well, what do you make? What do you make? But you're probably going to hear if within your organization, people at that same job title or people with that same scope of responsibilities are at different levels. There are many reasons for that, but it can be something that lets you know, hey, they're willing to pay somebody more in this role. So I have the value. I've shown them the things that I'm good at and that I'm bringing to the organization. So I feel confident in asking for something additional. You want to lead with any of these conversations with identifying your role within the team, the skills you bring, your longevity, the accomplishments that add value. Even if it is your supervisor and they know these things about you, leading up to the ask should be, what value do you bring? Why should I be excited to move to this next level for you? You want to also maybe talk about your desire to grow in your position and your future goals. I'd like to stay within this organization and I see myself doing X, Y, and Z. I would also like to know that my compensation level is in line with, again, whatever you're bringing to the organization. Here's kind of a thing to think about as well. If there's been some restructure in an organization you're in, if just that there have been some changes, you could start out with a conversation with your supervisor of, given recent changes, I'd like the chance to talk with you about looking at realigning my salary with the new ranges, and given my contributions to the team. Maybe you've been given new responsibilities. Maybe again, it's been a merger of groups and you know that people with your same title and role are coming in with a higher salary. So this is an opportunity to use that to your advantage and leverage that. Final additional tips. So counter offers can be aggressive, but reasonable. So everybody's always like, well, what does that mean? The aggressive part is based on the research that you've done. Go to that higher level of the range that you found if you feel like you can back it up with what you're bringing to the table. As long as and then the reasonable part is, don't go to a 50% increase. Don't go to a range that's way out of line with what that role in that industry, in that area should be receiving. But if it's reasonable, then go for the more aggressive side because they might be countering back. You might do a counter offer and then they might come back with you and you might be really lucky and they might say, yes, we agree with you. We're going to change your offer to X. You might counter offer and they might come back and say, we talked about it. We're not able to go all the way to 65, but we were able to bring it up to 62 and throw in $1,000 moving expenses or something like that. So they may come back with a lesser, but it's still more than your original offer. Even when they do that, you don't have to accept right away. You can still say, even if they came back and said, yeah, we're going to give you what you asked for, you're not under obligation to accept in that moment. You can let them know that's so exciting. I'm so happy that was able to be decided upon. I'd love to get back with you, in a couple of days to let you know my final decision. Because you may have other offers you're debating about, or you may have some other things you want to take into consideration. It is good though to know when to stop. If you've counter offered, they've come back and counter offered. Depends on how you feel about that counter offer. If you feel it's still way low based on your qualifications and the research you've done, you make one more counter offer back with an opportunity to get them up a little bit higher. Again, based on what you're offering. And then that way, if they come back and just say they can't go any farther, you know, you're kind of at that stopping point. Or if they come back with a counter offer and you feel like, you know, hey, based on what I've already know about myself, I want to work for this company. And if this is what they're able to do for me, I'm willing to take that. Again, I would ask for some time, but you don't necessarily have to keep the negotiation going on forever. You don't want to do that. We're going to know our walkaway number. Again, that's determined on just what would be, I can't take this job for less than, not for a negotiation chip, but for your purposes. You're going to ask for offers in writing. You want to try to have those salary negotiations with the decision maker if you can, so you don't have to do the, well, I'll wait for you to talk with your supervisor kind of thing. Negotiate that base salary first, then tackle other issues, because that's your you know, foundation. You want to maintain honesty and optimism. That comes into play with those things like don't make up a counter offer if you don't actually have one. Don't be saying things that you're bringing in terms of skill sets that you don't have, but also be optimistic and go into the negotiation with optimism that, again, it's going to be a win-win situation. Again, as I mentioned, some companies truly are first offer, best offer. So don't think, oh, I failed at negotiation if they come back and say that to you. There would be some sort of language that they would use if they, and they may tell you this actually when they make the offer. They may tell you this earlier in the job search process. So if you know that, if they've given you that information, they're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. That is going to be that their first offer is their best offer, and there's not really room to negotiate. The only thing that you might decide if you want to push back on there would be asking if there are other pieces that are negotiable other than salary, even though salary is not negotiable. But you may even just need to know that, hey, in this situation, I'm not going to get to use my negotiation skills, but in the future I will. And then just the times they are changing. So this means you just have to be up on what is happening in your industry, what is happening with the job market, because again, you might be able to push higher if you know that they are really in a desperate situation, versus if you know that, hey, I'm just really glad that I have an offer at all because it's so tight in this market. It doesn't mean you don't negotiate, but it means you might not have as much leverage to push to a much higher level. So be aware of kind of what the situation in the world is. You know, we are seeing post or, you know, after all of this pandemic kind of situation, we are seeing that people are able to do negotiations for some of those things like hybrid work, but it's not always the case either. So just understand what kind of is out there and what might be possibilities for you. All right, so what are questions that people have about salary negotiation? I know one that I often get that I really need to put into this presentation, and that is the application. So on some applications, they do ask for your current salary, you know, based on the idea that you may already be working, or they ask something about your salary needs. This one's a tricky one because with applicant tracking systems, some force you to put in something in there. And so then it depends on what do they force you to put in. If you can put in a range and you're being forced to do something, I would put in a range. If you can't put in a range at all, you know, you can try something like NA or something, you know, not applicable, and see if it will accept that. Sometimes it won't. Again, you're trying to push it as far into the future as possible because you want them to see all your qualifications first, and you don't want to price yourself out of a position. So what it comes back to there is that research ahead of time, right? If you've really done the research, you might even know specifically what that type of position in that organization seems to be running at in terms of a pay range. So you can put something in there that seems more in line. So yeah, my recommendation is if you can not answer that question, great. If you have to and are forced to, see if you can do more of a range, write something in there about, you know, negotiable or something like that. Again, pushing it as far as you can into the future. And then if you're forced to, you're going to have to go based on what your research is. It doesn't mean you can't still negotiate. If they say something about your salary needs and you put in 65,000 and then they offer you 65,000, you could still, if you feel like there's a range there that you are bringing some additional things to the table, you could still negotiate just because you put a number into that application process. First of all, they're probably not at that point going to even know what that is. And it doesn't mean you can't negotiate. Questions? Either you can unmute if you're out there on Zoom. If you're here in the room, any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Somebody just asked me recently why I thought I was worth that number, like in the first interview, and they asked me for a range, and I tried to say I want to negotiate. She said, just give me a range.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to at that point.
Yeah.
And then she was like, well, you're not as experienced in this. Like, why are you worth that? But like, I have a lot of like leadership and like other job experience. So what can you kind of leverage on in that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, just in case I don't know how much this is picking up. So we're asking if you are forced into talking about an amount or a range, and then they say back to you, basically, why are you worth that? That's where you want to have kind of your idea ahead of time of what are your selling points. So if it's a job that requires like an MBA, you might not be able to use your education quite as a leveraging point. But if it's not a requirement of the job, you could talk about your education, your additional education, and not just say, because I have my MBA. You want to say my MBA has brought me, a breadth of skills in a variety of different areas and things that I hadn't been exposed to before. I feel like it's improved my project management experience and my leadership, whatever it is. And then, yes, you want to draw on, I recognize that I may not have as many years of experience in human resources as some of the other candidates that you're interviewing. But what I, lack in that area, I make up for with. And then it's your traits, it's your other skills, your leadership, your interaction with people, your communication skills, some of those kind of transferable skills, soft traits, my enthusiasm for continuing to learn, that's something they want to know, that they can continue to grow, your desire to make a difference with this organization. That's where you can get in a little bit of a, buttering them up again with your knowledge of like their mission or something that makes you want to be a part of that organization and that you feel like you're going to help contribute in that line, so you can bring that up. Yeah, it's really just a matter of kind of the same types of things that you're talking about and selling yourself in the interview overall. You just want to maybe have some specific things in mind that you feel like counterbalance a little bit, maybe whatever it is that they might be saying. And for most people, that usually is what they say is, you don't have as much experience as some of the other candidates that we're interviewing. Well, what do you feel like counterbalances that? Also bringing up, yes, my experience within X field is limited at this point, but here's why my experience with this is transferable. Here's the things that I've gained from these skills that are directly going to help me with these. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I know you guys got to go. If there are any other questions that I didn't answer, you can always email me. And like I said, this presentation will be available on the website as soon as I can get it up there. Thank you.